Hi guys and welcome to Fandom Newbie. My name is Shruti and in today's video I'm going to be recommending 10 of my all-time favorite Indian books. Now I've mentioned these books in my videos like in the past, but I haven't ever consolidated all of them in one list, and so here it is, my top 10 best favorite Indian books that I have read till date. So yeah, let's get started. The first book is Train to Pakistan by Khushwant Singh. Now, this is a historical fiction book and it basically talks about the atrocities that took place during the partition of India. It is set in a fictional town called Manomajra, I believe, and it is in Punjab. And basically, this town was said to be a very peaceful town where the Sikh community and the Muslim community lived in harmony until partition. Basically, the politics and the corruption of partition sort of rips these two communities apart, and communal violence and hatred just completely destroys the lives of the people in this town. And all of this is what is explored through this historical fiction book. The partition of India into India and Pakistan is something that we study in our history books. It's something that we listen to like lectures about. We just consider it an event in history, but I felt like this was one of the first pieces of literature work that really gave this horrendous time in history a very human angle. It made it seem very real for me in my head. Like I finally understood just how catastrophic this time was in our history, and it brought that to life for me. And for that, this book will always have a very like important place in my heart. Like it's just one of the most emotionally heart-wrenching books that I have read. And yeah, I have an entire vlog about it. I read partition books. Another book which I'll talk about next is also mentioned in that vlog. So if you guys want like my deep dive into this book, then you can check out my video here. But yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite books. It was just an extremely emotional and heart-wrenching read for me. The next book is The Shadow Lines by Amitav Ghosh. Now, this book follows two families, an English family living in England and an Indian family living in Calcutta, and basically how the lives of these two families are interconnected because of events in history like British colonialism in India, World War II, and the partition of India. The thing that I really liked about this book is the way that the narrative style is. The way that it's written is how you would narrate like a story. It's kind of like a stream of consciousness kind of narrative style. So basically the narrator keeps like jumping around in like different timelines. It really feels like someone is telling you a story in real time, if that makes sense. Like the narrative structure in this book was very interesting, but it's also what really kept it engaging, because it's really about how people's stories and memories are affected by different events in history. And if you like historical fiction like that, where historical events sort of seep into the personal lives of people and you see how historical events affect the personal lives of people and the stories that are created over there, then I think you'll really like Shadow Lines by Amitav Ghosh, because it was just a very intriguing story. Next, we have Kari by Amrita Patil. Now, this is one of the only, this is the only Indian graphic novel that I have read, and it follows a 20-year-old girl as she is navigating her life in Mumbai in the 1990s, and she is like clinically depressed. So it follows like her journey with her mental health. It follows her journey with her discovering her own sexuality and accepting her own sexuality. It follows as she tries to, overcome the struggles of a very demanding and stressful job. The way that this book is written is in a very poetic way. There are a lot of metaphors in this book, which just makes the writing very poetic. And the illustrations in this book are also just very like hauntingly beautiful. Everything about this book was just very hauntingly beautiful. The writing, the illustrations, the themes that this book tackles, they're very like, dark, important, hard-hitting themes. And it was just very beautifully done. So Highly recommend. You'll finish reading this book in one day. It's a pretty short graphic novel. And yeah, it was just extremely, extremely beautiful. Next, we have Everybody Loves a Good Drought by P. Sainath. Now, P. Sainath was a columnist and a journalist, and this book is basically his documentation of all of his observations when he visited the poorest states in India. Now, this book was just a complete eye opener for me. Like, this book just made me so thankful for the life that I have, and it just made me realize how privileged I am to be living in a city in India, to be just like it just made me realize how lucky and privileged I am, because the condition of some of the poorest cities, towns, states in our country are deplorable. The condition of the education system, the condition of healthcare, even when it comes to just basic human rights, the conditions are just absolutely unthinkable. And this book was just extremely eye-opening for me. This is a non-fiction book, and it was written in the 1990s again. But it's still, I think, a very important book that everyone should read, just to understand how it used to be in our country in the 90s, and to see if actually, like, have we really made that much progress, or do some of those issues still exist in society today, and what we can do about it. I just think, yeah, very, very eye-opening book. Highly, highly, highly recommend everyone to read it. Next up is The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Now, this is a Mahabharata retelling from Draupadi's point of view. I think everyone has heard of this book. It's a highly popular, very, very famous book, but for good reason, because it's a really good book. The way that Chitra Banerjee has condensed all of the events of the Mahabharata into one novel, I think is just genius. And that too, like, for us to read it from Draupadi's point of view, who is such a flawed and such an interesting character, just gives this entire book, like, it just gives us a very fresh and new perspective of the Mahabharata. And I think that is what was most enjoyable about this book. The second thing that I really liked about this book is just the way the characters are described. Like, none of the characters are described as heroes, none of them are described as villains. They all have this gray morality, and they all have a very real and human portrayal. Like, every character is very, very realistic in this version of the Mahabharata, and I think that's also what makes it very interesting and very engaging to read. So if you're looking for a really good, fresh, new take on the Mahabharata, and a slightly feminist take on the Mahabharata as well, then highly recommend The Palace of Illusions if you haven't read it yet. Next up, we have Ghachar Gochar by Vivek Shanbag. So this book follows a family who goes through like a rags to riches kind of transformation. They start off as being a family that's very poor, but then their like luck changes, and they become a pretty well-off family. But with money comes a lot of problems, because basically what this book uncovers is how like receival of money and like the change in their fortunes, how that affects their interpersonal relationships, how that affects how these family members behave with one another, and yeah, basically what it does to them, like what money and getting it does to that family. Very, very well written book. I think it gives us a good idea of like Indian society and some of the problems with Indian society. And yeah, just very, very well written book. Highly, highly recommend. Next up, we have Sita by Devdutt Patnaik. This is his retelling of the Ramayana. And I don't know if you can see, but like I have annotated the hell out of this book. I just had such an amazing time reading this book. Like I didn't expect to be captivated by the Ramayana so much. Like I've always loved the Mahabharata more than I loved the Ramayana. I always found the Mahabharata to be so much more interesting, but this changed my mind about the Ramayana. It made me realize how nuanced the Ramayana is. It made me finally understand the teachings and the morals of what Ram wanted to convey. It made me respect the epic so much more, and it completely changed my mind about the Ramayana. I think, yeah, I have a newfound respect for this piece of literature. I have a newfound respect for what it's trying to convey. But like, yeah, I understand the Ramayana a lot more now because of this, and for that, this will always have a very important place in my heart as well. The next book is The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. Now, I feel that there is no book that captures the Indian immigrant experience better than this book. You know, like the feelings of struggling with your identity, the feelings of wanting to hold on to your Indianness when you're in a foreign country, the feelings of loneliness and the lack of community when you're in a foreign country, the struggles you go through when you're trying to navigate two completely different cultures, and like, you know, trying to find your identity when you're in between these two cultures. Like all of these themes are explored in such a beautiful way in this book. I actually grew up in the US and I lived there until I was 10 years old, and so I related a lot to this book because I feel like, because my formative years have been in the US, and then even after that, like I've lived in different parts of the world. Like I feel like half my life has been outside India and half my life has been in India. And because of that, I feel like I really relate to the struggles that these characters went through. Like just the trying to discover what your identity is, trying to fit into a community, like those struggles that these characters went through, I related to them so much. And that is why I love this book so much. Like Jhumpa Lahiri's writing, the way she describes and captures emotions is so vivid and so beautiful, and just like it makes you feel so many things in your heart. And yeah, I love this book. I love this story. This also has a very important place in my heart. Next up, we have Born to be King by Deepak Thomas. Now, this is a really fun Indian fantasy book that is set in a world that is just the perfect blend of Indian mythology and traditional fantasy elements. So, this follows our main character, who is Princess Kautilya, who, in a family where there are a lot of boys, like her brothers, who have very powerful magical abilities, she's basically born with not very interesting magical abilities, or like very few magical abilities, if I'm not mistaken. And so she's just sort of like living her life in the palace without a lot of like expectations on her, because she's just like super plain as compared to her brothers. But then her world is just flipped upside down when her family gets betrayed, and because of this she is thrust into a quest and basically just a full-blown revolution against the empire. And through this quest, she basically meets just a bunch of misfit characters who are super fun and super quirky, who join her in this revolution. It's just like it has all the classic fantasy elements that any like good fantasy book has, but with an Indian twist, and it is just really fun. There's pretty decent world building. The characters are fun and quirky, and yeah, overall just a very fun fantasy book. And finally, we have Bombay Balchao by Jane Borges. I've spoken about this book quite a few times on my channel already, but this book basically follows the lives of different members of the Coutinho family as they're living in a Catholic neighborhood called Kavel. And basically, we understand how the different members of this family have lived their lives across a span of many years, like from the 1940s to like the early 2000s in Bombay. And along with the family stories, we also get like multiple stories of Bombay. So we see like the political evolution of Bombay, we see cultural evolutions in Bombay, and they're all intertwined with this family. So along with the family stories, we also get like stories of Bombay. Really fun book again, especially if you're from Bombay. I think you'll find this book super fun and relatable. So yeah, that was my video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give this video a big fat thumbs up. Leave a comment down below letting me know which are your favorite Indian books. And of course, do subscribe to my channel for more book related videos. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.